Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Anthony Salas, and on behalf of the American Marketing Association, I'd like to welcome you to today's webcast sponsored by ClickTale and titled Mobile Web, New Design Strategies that Drive Revenue and Engagement. We here at the AMA provide you with this webcast as one of the many special programs offered to the marketing community, and we invite you to participate in this ongoing series of free web seminars to help you drive the greatest return on your marketing investments. Whether it's in research, advertising, promotions, social media, and beyond, our webcasts offer education in all key areas of marketing. So make sure to join us every week for these informative thought leader webcasts featuring some of the most expert minds in marketing. You can see a full list of upcoming webcasts by going to marketingpower.com/webcast. Before getting started, I would like to cover just a few housekeeping items. Today's webcast is being recorded and will be made available to you very soon after the live presentation, so please look out for that. If you have any technical or content-related questions as we progress, please use the chat feature located to the left of your screen. Technical questions will be addressed immediately upon receipt, and any content-related questions will be addressed at the end of the full presentation. However, again, feel free to enter those at any time as the presentation progresses. We also invite you to join our conversation today on Twitter. We are using hashtag ClickTaleMobile for the engagement there, so please join us if you're able to do so. So we're very excited to have our speakers joining us today. We have Julie Osk, who is the Vice President, Principal Analyst serving eBusiness and Channel Strategy Professionals from Forrester Research, as well as Hadas Sheinfeld, who is the Vice President of Product Management with ClickTale. And they have a lot of really great information to share with you today. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Julie, who's going to get us started.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. I apologize that I advanced your slide too quickly. So again, I'm Julie Osk, and if it helps just to have a little bit of background in terms of the research that I'm going to present today and my point of view and its origin. I've been at Forrester Research. I think I'm in my 13th year now. And the work that I've been doing for the past 6-7 years is really helping business professionals understand the opportunities that mobile technology gives to them. And so I've been doing a broad range of mobile work that really spans a number of industries. And I probably in any given year work with a couple hundred of our clients to think about what they should be doing in mobile and how they should be doing it. And hopefully that helps as a bit of background. So let me jump in. There's a quote from my colleague James McQuivey in his book Digital Disruption that says, when consumers adopt technology, they do old things in new ways, and when people internalize technology, they find new things to do. I apologize, the markup of this is a little bit off, but where we really are today is we are still doing old things in new ways. So we're still really at the portion where consumers adopt technology and they're doing old things in new ways. As an example, if I show you, we look at how consumers are using mobile phones while they're shopping. Here you can see, they're doing things like locating the nearest store, they're taking pictures to share with their friends, looking at product information, getting pricing review, and so forth. They're using their phones in store to get things like reviews and help them make the best decision. But if you really look at this list, for the most part, consumers are still doing old things in new ways. And we really haven't shifted to doing the new things that mobile is really capable of doing. And I like to start out with this story because until we begin to understand how consumers are using mobile devices differently and really using the analytics to develop insights to think very, very differently about mobile, we're still going to be stuck in this paradigm of doing old things in new ways. So the key questions that I wanted to address in today's session is, what are the key trends in mobile? What and why for mobile first? And what role does analytics play in this transition to mobile first? So key trends, 2 categories, enterprise and consumer services. So if I really think about the enterprise impact when we think about mobile trends, there's 4 key trends that my colleague Tamal Hussain and I identified here at Forrester. The first is that mobile will require more formal organizations, process, and governance. If we think about mobile initiatives 3 to 4 years ago, there was an element of, okay, there was a single mobile champion in an organization. That individual owned the core mobile app or the mobile website for that company. That person grew into a group. But now if we look at the use of mobile throughout an organization, especially something like mobile web, the marketing organization wants to use it, the commerce organization does, the folks in customer service, the employees, the field service staff. There's such a demand from the organization to use mobile as a tool to engage with consumers or to engage with employees, that the scope of mobile has just expanded so much that it's no longer the case where a person or a small team is capable of managing all of that. The second key trend that we identified this year is strategic staffing will increase in importance. One of the things that's holding back, one of many things that's holding mobile back today is simply the lack of expertise in mobile. Top of the list tends to be things like the ability to design UI or experience, mobile development skills, and certainly the ability to use analytics and to develop insights. One of the, when I do, not surveys, but when I do interviews with executives around best in class, one of the things that we know is that having user experience and the ability to improve the user experience inside a company is one of the key things that's most highly correlated to success, or people feeling as if they're set up for success. And certainly those folks aren't out there today. Companies are staffing up very, very quickly, and most don't have enough of a strategic plan in place in terms of how they're going to acquire talent. Third, and I'll touch on this a little bit more detail, is spending will increase, especially to enable mobile services. And I'll pause on that for just a minute. And then the availability of what we call adjacent technologies will limit mobile services. As much talk as there is about location, for example, or things like NFC, there isn't enough Wi-Fi out there. Things like GPS don't yet work indoors. There aren't enough POS terminals with things like NFC that, to some extent, the mobile phone, the technology in the mobile phone isn't the inhibitor as much as it is some of those adjacent technologies. And as I like to say, the age of mobile and the cheap is over. So just going to do a little bit more detail here on spending will increase. If we think about the spending, the majority of mobile costs are going to shift to support the back end. If we think about the mobile development work for mobile web or applications up front, that can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars or maybe a couple $1 million a year, depending on the level of integration, the quality of the experience, how frequently the updates are done, the complexity of the service, and so forth. But if we really think about where the focus is going forward, it's really in things like analytics, developing insights, web services, and creating APIs, and really creating and putting the infrastructure in place to support forward-looking mobile services. Looking at some spending data, this is an annual survey that I conduct each year with my colleague Tamal Hussain, where we go out and we talk to folks that are working with mobile, marketing professionals, e-business professionals. It really runs the gamut. And here you can see that overall investments in mobile are too small, with 58% of the folks that we surveyed are spending less than $1 million annually. One of the reasons that I do both survey work as well as interviews is to provide some context around the survey data that we see, because I would tell you, as you look at these numbers, you shouldn't take them as a benchmark. I think you should take this as a data point that mobile efforts are underfunded, and if we think about the industry leaders, they're well into the 7, if not 8 figures annually in terms of what they're spending on mobile. So next I just wanted to switch here to some of the trends that we see and the impact that they're having on the consumer. The first is that mobile platforms will be the catalyst for the next generation of connected experiences. Second, tablet commerce will outpace mobile commerce, but I think the comparison is irrelevant. Number 7 overall on the list, and third on this list, is that mobile is playing a leading role in engaging consumers in emerging markets. And then finally, where I want to spend more time today is the sophisticated analytics wrapped around big data will power next generation smart apps. And this is from a report that Tamal and I published about 6 months ago here at Forrester. So the first is we think about mobile platforms, they're really the catalyst for this new connected experiences. If we look at platforms like Android or Apple, we look at what Amazon is doing, Facebook and Microsoft, this isn't just about a mobile phone or a smartphone. It's not even just about mobile phones and tablets. We're now talking about things like Google Glass, TV in the living room for Apple and Google and for Microsoft. Microsoft already has set-top boxes in millions of Americans and Europeans' households. We're talking about the experience in the car. And then if we also look at the lower right-hand corner here, we're talking about devices like the Nest that communicate with a smartphone platform, or things like the I guess what we call iHealth, which is part of the portfolio of devices that help monitor health, whether it's your blood pressure, your heart rate, whatever it may be. The extensibility of these mobile platforms goes far beyond what the mobile phone is today, and it's really, a platform for this next generation of connected experiences. So when we think about web and the quality of the experiences, it's certainly more than the phone. So one of the questions that I get a lot is, well, we've lumped our tablet together with mobile. I would tell you that I think tablet commerce will outpace mobile commerce, but I would tell you that the comparison isn't the right comparison. There's certainly a lot of overlap today in how people are using mobile phones and how they're using tablets and PCs. That is because we still are in this era of people doing old things in new ways, and we still have a lot of companies that are creating the same services on a small screen as they are on a large screen. But as we look a few years out, I really believe that the use cases for the mobile phone are going to diverge from the tablet. How we use mobile phones is different. Where we use mobile phones is different. And as companies have the bandwidth and the expertise and they develop the competencies to really evolve their mobile services, we'll see people using mobile phones very differently from the ways they're using the tablet and the PC, which will become more interchangeable going forward, especially for people that are consuming content. One of the data slides that Forrester has that I think really tells this picture well, or tells the story very well, is that tablets are primarily used at home while smartphones are used everywhere. And this is U.S. data. If you look at the left-hand side of this chart and you look at the primary places that people are accessing the internet from their tablet, it's the living room, it's the bedroom, it's the kitchen. It tends to be places that are stationary and primarily while they're at home. If you look at the right-hand side of this chart, people use their smartphones everywhere. They're accessing the internet from everywhere that they go. They could be home, they could be on the go, they could be outdoors, they could be in a restaurant. But the mobile phone is really that device that I rely on 24/7 that has that connectivity. If we look at just at a high level and some of the differences between the tablet and the phone, I know these slides are going to be available for download later, but there's a couple of things that I look to without reading through some of the small details. But in terms of a phone, it's a personal device today. It's something that I feel I have to have. A tablet is more something that's optional. It's a piece replacement. It's a nice to have. It's a phenomenal device for media consumption and shopping and things like that. Far more individuals have mobile phones today. Many of us have 2 mobile phones today, whereas adoption of things like tablets is still growing. The number is bigger in the U.S. than it is in Europe today, but we're at about 1 in 5 households in the U.S. today. But I think really for me, one of the really main differences between the phone and the tablet is when we look at the connectivity. These mobile phones have 24/7 cellular connectivity. They're always on, they're always connected, whereas the vast majority of tablets rely on a Wi-Fi connection, and only a minority, you can see there about 11% have a cellular connection. So this isn't this device that I'm just going to turn on while I'm commuting or turn on while I'm in a store or turn on wherever it may be, because I'm just not going to have that connectivity. And then if I drop down things like adoption drivers, certainly a mobile phone is something I have to have. It's something I'll update fairly frequently. It's subsidized by carriers in many countries in the world, and it's very different from the tablet. Certainly PCs aren't going to go away. If we look especially in like the retail category of how people use mobile phones versus PCs, they're still carrying the heavy load. If we think about retail, for example, only about 10% of retail is what we call e-commerce. Only a couple of percent of e-commerce is mobile commerce. Certainly mobile has the opportunity to influence, in-store sales, but still, the PC, when we think about the digital channel, is carrying the bulk of the load, at least today. And these numbers are from Europe. If we think about what folks are doing on tablets as well, this data is also from Europe. Browsing and commerce are very popular. And I think, especially when we think about the tablet experience, the browsing experience is so good on the tablet that we see far more experiences that are web-enabled, also because they rely on that Wi-Fi connectivity, that fatter pipe, than we see folks building applications. And certainly as we look at the tablet as more of a PC replacement, the adoption and use of these devices for researching and purchasing products is very high. It should be as no surprise that the adoption of mobile phones has exploded globally and will continue to do so. 2 of the biggest growth areas are in India and places like China. And then the 12 billion and the 2.7 billion euros that you see on the slide, and sorry, that 2.7 should be $1 billion number. That's the m-commerce number for the U.S. For last year, and for Europe for the past year as well. So not even thinking about the influence of mobile on in-store sales or the influence of mobile or mobile as a customer service channel, the pure commerce numbers alone are very large. And it's certainly going to be the primary and is the primary digital channel to engage with your customer base globally. All right, so the last big trend that I wanted to talk about, and this was about the consumer side, is really thinking about these analytics wrapped around what I call contextual data powering next generation and what we call mobile-first applications. Mobile phones are going to diverge from the PC in terms of what they can do, and so too, we say, must your approach to developing and delivering mobile services. And this is what we call the mobile-first approach. I know this is a term that a lot of folks use, so I'll explain what I mean by mobile-first. Mobile-first doesn't mean that a mobile takes a higher priority than other devices or channels. What mobile-first means is that you're designing for mobile at the start rather than using more of a retrofit approach. And there's three primary ways that mobile will be different. Mobile is unique from the PC in that it's highly contextual. It's very, very well suited for tasks, and it's what we call it provides an opportunity to create a very relevant services layer on top of the physical environment. Just really quickly, if we think about how phones are going to be very different from PCs, is they're going to have a lot of new technologies. We're already seeing examples of how technology in phone is enabling us to control these devices differently. We're going to see more voice-based control. We're going to see more gesture-based control. We're going to see more biometrics because those will be more intuitive, easier mechanisms for controlling a phone than the paradigms that we have from the PC today with the drag and drop and the menus and so forth, not really providing the same kind of ability to navigate and get things done quickly that we need to have on the mobile device. The displays will become more high resolution, the inputs will become more fine-tuned, and certainly the quality of these displays is going up. And then finally, when we think about the amount of data based on the number of sensors that are in the phones, where we are today, we're also talking about sensor fusion, the combination of two sensors together and the kind of data and information that they can generate. We already have accelerometers and gyroscopes and so forth in the phone. We're going to have microbolometers, chemical sensors. There'll be a phenomenal number of attachments to the phone. There'll be devices like the Nest that communicate with the phone remotely and share information. But the phone will have a phenomenal amount of information about a consumer, and that's what we talk about when we talk about the future of mobile being context around mobile phones. Forrester defines context as the sum total of what your customer has told you, as well as what he or she is experiencing at their moment of engagement. And we think about that in three core categories. One is the situation, right? So the current location, altitude, and speed the customer is experiencing. This is a lot of how I would say enterprises are using context today because they're so focused on location and what's nearby. Preferences, this is something that comes more from the online experience or the web experience, the history and personal decisions the customer has shared with you, and then attitudes, the feelings or emotions that are implied by the customer's actions and logistics. It's certainly a phenomenal amount of information. And if we look at how this information is being used today, I'll give you a couple of examples here of how it can be used versus how it should be used. One of the things we think about, if you think about, I just used a very generic travel example here, American Express, kind of a global credit card. But your credit card, your American Express card knows a lot about you. For example, it knows that you've traveled to Mexico, you've rented a car, where you're staying, can determine what the temperature is. What if your American Express or what if one of your rewards partners were to send you a text message that said, hey, we suspect that you're driving to Chichen Itza today. Our travel partner is offering a special price on tours if you booked with your American Express. It has the ability to do all of that based on the contextual information available, but you have to think about whether that's creepy or helpful. What if American Express or, your rewards or card partner has that same kind of information, but they use that information to say, well, we see your card was just used to purchase tickets to Chichen Itza. Please enter your 4-digit passcode to confirm that you have possession of your card, and it's used less for marketing and more for utility to create some kind of value. And that's really the direction that context needs to go in terms of how we think about using context. So the difference is, if you think about the first example, that really seems more like, oh, this is Big Brother watching. It has the potential to be very creepy if we think about all of this contextual information we collect and how it could be used. What we want folks to shift to is using this contextual information to think more like, oh, this is Big Mother who's helping. We're creating utility. We're creating value. It's helpful versus creepy marketing. If we think about how context will evolve over time, if we look at where we are today here in 2012 and 2013, for a lot of companies, they're still in what we call the phase one of using basic context. So it's about behaviors, preferences I've expressed, its location, what's nearby, store hours, is it open? For example, anybody who's used the Yelp application on a mobile phone or the Yelp web service on a mobile phone, it always tells you if the restaurant is open or closed. It doesn't give you the hours, but it tells you if it's open or closed. That's using context to simplify the experience. The next phase, and this is where we see a lot of airlines, and we're beginning to see retailers today, is what we call adding a layer of intelligence on top of that context. So when we think about the experience that somebody, for example, needs to have in a store versus in a competitor store versus home with a retailer, those experiences are very different. If I'm at home and I open up a retailer's application, that means I'm preparing for a store visit. So I'm building a shopping list. I want to see what's on sale, what are the store hours. If I'm in the retailer's location, then my needs have changed because I want to find the items in the store, put them in my cart, pay for them, ensure that I've gotten the best possible deal, ensure that I've selected the best products for myself before I go on. So my needs are very different based on where I am, and so you want to have different experiences based on where somebody is. The third layer, or evolution of context, which as we talk about it, is the additional information that the sensors provide or devices that connect to the sensors, and then finally how we control these devices will be fundamentally different. One of the examples that I often use for this is an airline example because so many of us travel today. If we think about you're visiting your airline's mobile website, and if it's 2 days before your flight, the airline can make some assumptions relative to the time of the event, what it is that you may want to do. So if you're 2 days ahead of the flight, you may want to reserve a seat, see what time your reservation is. But if you're 2 hours before the flight, then your needs are very different because you need to see what gate it is. Is the flight going on time? Are they serving food on the plane? Or do I need to buy something before I get on the plane? If I'm on the plane, then is it taking off on time? Can I communicate with whoever is picking me up at the airport? Is there connectivity on board, entertainment on board? If I'm off the plane, then my needs have changed again because I need ground transportation or I need to find my luggage. And then 2 days after my flight, my needs have changed again because it's more about the loyalty or have my points posted, so to speak. So my needs are very different based on time relative to an event, and this is how we expect to see mobile services here evolve. This is actually already happening in the airline industry. It's already happening in the retail industry, but we expect this to be more commonplace rather than the exception. If we think about how consumers behave on PCs, they surf, they explore. If we think about an automotive consumer, for example, longer sessions, I'm going to visit multiple sites. It may take me 3 months to do research online, visit a dealer, figure out what car that I want. But once I get onto a mobile phone, I become much more task-oriented. So while I may use my mobile phone to do some research for a car, when I think about my mobile phone in the context of automotive, I'm more likely to want to get ratings, reviews. Where is a dealer? Is the dealer open? I'm driving my car, buying gas, fix a flat tire. I've had an accident. I need help navigating. It's much more short-term, much more task-oriented than the long-term process that I may do on a mobile phone. And then finally, if we think about the third way that mobile services are very different, we talk about mobile being a services layer or an enhancement to the real-world experiences. Mobile becomes very real-time. So if we think about commerce in real time, going forward, the physical world, my shoes, a purse I see, a movie poster at a bus stop will be catalysts for spontaneous commerce. If I see another woman, she has a purse, I like it, I'm going to take a picture of it, identify it, find it, and buy it. I'm not necessarily going to go to this. I may go to a store to buy it, but I may also just buy it online. But it really separates the place from the service in this case. Same thing with advertising in real time. Mobile tactics such as augmented reality on phones or Google Glass will help travelers find restaurants that fit their tastes, budgets, and attire. And certainly mobile phones make this relevant to me. If I like Asian food, if I have a budget of between $10 to $20 for my meal, whatever it may be, the mobile phone is able to tailor the content and what I'm discovering relative to my interests. Or if we think about going into this is an example from a Starbucks, really personalizing decisions in real time and helping me make the right decision for me. So if I am on a diet, then I want to find a low-calorie food. If I'm gluten-free or if I have a child with a nut allergy, then I want to avoid those foods. But this is really about personalizing or making the physical world very relevant to me. So all of this doesn't happen overnight. Mobile services have to evolve over time. Certainly there's still a lot of companies out there that are doing nothing. The first step that a lot of companies take, especially with the mobile web, is squeezing it or shrinking it and just simply putting everything that was on the PC onto a small screen. The next step that companies take is really thinking about enhancing other touch points with mobile. So mobile doesn't have to be this holistic replacement for other channels or other touch points, but mobile can also enhance other touch points. For example, if I order takeout for pickup, the restaurant can let me know that the food is ready to be picked up, so I don't have to wait, or I don't wait too long and the food is cold. The next stage is really thinking about new products and services. For a lot of companies, mobile will be a new service for them. And then finally, we tie back into context and really thinking about the simplicity that can be offered. If we go back to that example of the airline has the potential to make my on-phone experience so much more simple and help me execute on tasks more quickly by interpreting that context and anticipating what it is that I want to do through analytics and developing insights. So how do you think about anticipating needs? When we're thinking about the design of these services and these scenarios, you really need to begin to think about anticipating, using this context to anticipate the needs of your customer base. We talk about building personas and doing cohort analysis for who are your different customer segments. What are their needs? What do they want to do on the go? And really beginning to use analytics to develop some of these insights. And then when you talk about the delivery, certainly you can't have analytics and insights without some kind of an action that follows. But taking this context and beginning to predict or anticipate events and determining what is the need of my consumer, and then certainly being able to deliver the content, the assets, the content, the services that are appropriately assembled through the right navigation based on the consumer need or device at that time. Difficult to do. This is definitely very forward-looking, but this is one of the reasons why we talk about having the right, collecting the right information, having the analytical tools, the ability to develop the insights and act upon those insights is so critical when we talk about mobile going forward, because we're in a phase of really very quickly evolving what mobile services are for consumers today. So if we break that down into steps, we always talk to our clients about beginning with your journey maps for your different personas or cohort groups. Sometimes they're sticky notes, sometimes they're more formal. This is an example from the travel industry where we really think about, what are the use cases on the go? Certainly the story arc is very broad because it goes from planning my trip to my next trip, but really the use case for the mobile phone is really, while I am traveling is where I really, really need to have my mobile phone. And some of the needs that I may have while I'm on the go are things like I'm late, my flight was canceled, I need ground transportation. Those are the needs that I have on the go, not necessarily reserving and booking my next trip. So then if you begin to think about what combination of contextual and existing information do we need to anticipate needs, let's take this example of I'm late. There's contextual information that the airline can interpret, like passenger location, my frequent flyer status, traffic information. It may know, if I give the airline permission to know my location, it can know how fast I'm traveling, what my mode of transportation is. And then there's just also information that it has about my itinerary, the airport information, how long are the security lines, what's the flight status. So the airline has the ability to not only know if I'm going to be late based on where I am and the status of the flight, but it also has the ability to react to that. So when we think about that, what content or services do you need to deliver and how is this going to vary by cohort? We're really talking about on-the-go use cases. What are the needs of those groups while they're on the go? In this case, like I'm late, it's gate number, departure time, check-in, and really focusing on developing and driving towards those needs. Unfortunately today, I would tell you too few companies have implemented mobile analytics solutions. The key to success is having analytics in place, and here you can see overall amongst the companies that we surveyed, only about 47% of them have implemented a mobile analytics solution today. That number is a bit higher in retail than it is in financial services, and certainly companies that are larger, that are more enterprise as opposed to small and medium-sized businesses, have done a better job of implementing mobile analytics solutions. So if we talk about where we are today as well, I think there's been the case to adopt analytics to focus on your own success metrics. Is the mobile web service that I've built paid off? What is my ROI? How is it performing? And we really need to see a shift towards using those analytics to really drive the next generation of services. So the focus today is good. Certainly when we talk to our clients, or in this case a survey about what are the top 3 priorities or objectives for mobile strategy for phones, they are thinking about driving sales, driving traffic into stores. They're thinking about engagement and satisfaction. They're unable, though, too few are being able to track across channels. Here you can see very few are tracking both online and offline channels. That number is very small overall. It's only about 18%. There's certainly a better ability to track across users across online or digital channels, but still too many that aren't able to track consumers across multiple channels and really understand the full impact that mobile is happening, especially when we think about an in-store experience. So as we think about the migration and where this needs to go, we need to move away from simply, defining metrics, having some analytics, having some KPIs that really say, well, are we meeting our objectives or not? And we really need to transition to this world where we're taking this contextual information we're identifying these metrics, we're using analytics to generate insights, but really that notion of action and improving the experience, improving the conversion funnel has to be a core element and something that's very locked into this ecosystem of how and why we're using analytics as we look forward. This next slide has more detail. It has, more examples. When we talked about context, the identity, situation, behavior, emotions, the kinds of metrics that companies collect, engagement, financial performance. And then I know the print is a little bit small here on the slide, but what we're talking about is just, giving some examples of analytics, like what improves engagement. These are some of the questions that you're going to have to be able to answer. Which of my creatives have a higher conversion rate? If my customer's mobile phone location is different from that of the ATM, has their card been stolen? What reduces retention? What increases loyalty? And then just really developing insights about what happens in the mobile environment. If consumers are dropping out of your purchase funnel when they're required to enter payment information, then you need to simplify the experience. Consumers who create a shopping list in your application or web service spend 4 times as much money on average as somebody who doesn't. You need to think about, well, how are we going to get more people engaged with our mobile service? And then really the actionable element of here is so important that you're not just generating insights, but you're actually acting on those insights. So finally, just looking a little bit, we really talk about enterprises also adopting a mobile-first approach to analytics. It's certainly very important to have the cross-channel tracking, and you see that with a lot of companies simply saying, you know what, I've got the solution that I have for the web, like an Omniture or a Web Trends. I'm just going to port that over and use it for mobile. But keep in mind, that's a great way to approach this, but you also have to really understand how mobile is different and what the needs of mobile are here. And some of what you see here is, there's still a lot of upside here, and there's still a lot of companies that need to put mobile analytics solutions in place and really think about some of these unique needs of mobile while also tracking their consumers across, other online channels. So just to summarize here, as I would say, simply shrinking or squeezing an experience design for the PC is not enough. Experiences need to migrate in sophistication from simply being a shrunken down version of your PC onto a small phone to really enhancing other touch points. And then you really need to think about, how am I using context to simplify and meet the needs of my consumers? And then certainly analytics play a key role in generating the insights needed for the next generation of mobile services. I'm not going to take questions. I think we're going to hold questions to the end at this point. I will quickly put up my contact information here. The orange may be a little bit hard to read, but that's josk@forrester.com. And then let me hand it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for this very, very interesting and insightful presentation, and I couldn't agree more with the trends that you've discovered and described here. In my part of today's webinar, I would like to walk you through our recently launched ClickTale Touch product, which is a major new addition to the ClickTale offering that deals with touch devices. I want to encourage you to ask questions. You have the chat window on the left, so any questions to Julie or to myself, please just write them in there, and we will answer them at the end part of this webinar. So for those of you who don't know us, ClickTale was established 6 years ago as a startup aimed at helping website owners improve the experience of visitors on their website, and through that, improve the success of the website achieving its goals. We are in the business of what we call in-page analytics, which means our product provides insight as to how visitors behave on the page. This is compared to what we call traditional analytics, which usually refers to behavior between pages. Since 2006, with your help, we have grown significantly and now have thousands of customers worldwide relying on our session playback, heat maps, form analytics, and other features. ClickTale Core offers our users the ability to view every mouse move, click, and scroll the users make on the site. Our most granular level of insight is session playback, where you can view exactly how a visitor behaved on your site. On top of that, which is very detailed information, we also create beautiful visual aggregated reports in the form of heat maps that allow you to view how groups of visitors, hundreds of thousands of visitors, behave on a specific page. We offer 4 types of heat maps. We have click heat map, mouse move heat map, scroll reach heat map, and attention heat map. I think the name pretty much says it all. But basically, we make it easy for you to see where your visitors click, often they click on elements that you didn't expect them to click. Where they hover, where they move their mouse, again, often on areas you didn't expect. And all of these things indicate how interesting these elements are on the page. The scroll reach heat map will indicate how far down the page visitors scroll, and the attention heat map will add the information of how much time visitors spent on each of the sections of the page. ClickTale Core also offers conversion funnels that are very flexible and dynamic, and the form analytics feature, which allows you again to analyze the way visitors interact with your form, which fields are most problematic, which take most time to complete, how many visitors start engaging with the form and then leave, abandon it. All these questions can be answered using the ClickTale Form Analytics. So following this short introduction, let's dive into ClickTale Touch, our mobile offering. Our ClickTale Touch offering has been in beta test for the last 10 months. And we announced general availability just last week. My goal today is to share with you some of the insights we already gained from our work with multiple customers who participated in the beta program. But first, let's define exactly what we mean when we talk about mobile. There are many ways to consider what's generally called the mobile experience. Does mobile refer to specific devices or specific device sizes? Looking at size seems to be the traditional approach, but nowadays with the iPad mini taking tablets to a smaller scale and the Galaxy Note taking smartphones to a bigger scale, size doesn't seem to be a good qualifier for a mobile device. Another option could obviously be the usage pattern. Mobile is used well in a mobile scenario, when you're on the go. And the opposite of mobile would be desktop, where you need to be at home inside by a desk to actually use it. But we find that these definitions are also being blurred. A recent study showed that 86% of tablet usage is done in the home environment. So at ClickTale, we decided that the criterion we will be looking at is actually the interface itself. That's why our solution is called ClickTale Touch. It refers to the touch interface. We recognize the device based on the user agent and the type of gestures that it actually utilizes. And any device that uses a touch interface, we categorize as a touch device in our system. So as we have now established what mobile means in the ClickTale system, we can move on to mobile strategies. In general, we see two strategies a company can take when attending to mobile or touch users. First, you can attend to your users who browse through their mobile device to your website. You can offer customers the exact same website they view through their desktop computers, or a website that is tailored specifically to mobile devices. The buzz in this area is, of course, responsive design, which refers to a website that was originally designed to display different content to differently sized devices. When a responsive site is planned and designed, thought needs to be given to which features and content and buttons and images should be shown to the different device sizes. And then when the site is implemented, it basically checks which type of device is accessing it, and based on the size of the device, it displays the correct content for that particular size. So mobile web is the first option, and that is the option that our product ClickTale Touch covers. The other option is to build an app. An app is usually distributed through the App Store, and users access the app to access the content that you want to deliver to them. Apps can be native apps, meaning that they were specifically written for an operating system, or they can be what's called a hybrid app, which means that essentially you take an HTML website and wrap it into an app that can be downloaded. Recent statistics show that while app usage is diversifying, it is still concentrated on very few specific categories, such as games, weather apps, social networks, and music. In parallel, we see a big increase in mobile browsing and commerce. Our customers report numbers as big as 30% of the traffic coming from mobile web browsing. The conversion and monetization of mobile traffic is also dramatically increasing, as you've just seen in Julie's presentation. So now that we are all on the same page regarding what mobile actually means and the different options to deliver content to mobile users, let me jump right into some insights we found during the ClickTale Touch beta. So as I mentioned, our beta went live in June of last year and included a full set of new features tailored to support touch interface. The new features include a new session player that was developed to capture every gesture. ClickTale Touch captures every tap, scroll, tilt, zoom. Everything is captured and recreated in the session player so you can see exactly what the user saw. To give you a quick example, I have a sample session playback of a visitor on the ClickTale website. We will use ClickTale website in this webinar to show you some examples, and all the data I'm showing you is real data of visitors coming to our site. So let's start. I hope you can all see it. For me, it's still loading. There you go. So what you see here is the ClickTale session player. At the top, you see the controls where you can move between pages, play, and pause. You have the list of pages that the visitor saw. And every tap and every gesture is marked. You've just seen a tilt that the user, it's an iPhone user. You've seen them tilt the phone 90 degrees to the right. All the taps, double taps, swipes, everything is captured at the top. What you now saw is that the keyboard was opened, and that's the gray area here at the bottom. Every gesture of the user was captured through our session player. So this is just to give you a little taster of what we collect and how we display it on the individual, very granular level. So on top of the data that we collect of the individual interactions, ClickTale Touch offers 3 types of heat maps, which correspond to the heat maps I've described previously of the ClickTale core offering. So we have a tap heat map, mapping the taps on the page, an exposure heat map, which measures the level of exposure each part of the page received, and an attention heat map, which measures not only how many times a part of the page was exposed, but also how long that part was exposed for. We will see examples of these heat maps as part of the insights I will show you next. The insights I plan to share with you today come from the customers who participated in the ClickTale Touch beta. I will show you examples using both ClickTale's own website, and we deliver the exact same website, and it doesn't matter to us if you come from a mobile device or from a desktop device. We do absolutely no customization. And I'll also show you examples from one of our beta participants who actually uses responsive design to their website to deliver different content for different devices. The main observation, which I believe all beta participants shared, and it's very similar to what Julie described just a few minutes ago, is that the mobile experience is still very much a black box. The desktop world has been developed for years now. Research has been done, books have been written, usability, user interface, user experience, whole professions have been established defining usability laws and best practices of how to design for desktop, keyboard, mouse, screen, the setup. I think everyone understands that the mobile experience is very, very different. It's different on many levels. The first is, of course, the interface, the interaction. Another level is the context of usage, whether it's outdoors or even in the house. Using a mobile device usually involves split attention. It is rare that a user will sit holding their smartphone or tablet and not do anything else in the background. This could be walking the street, or it could be watching TV that runs in the background. So we know we're talking about a whole different experience. But we don't know, and we don't really have any set of conventions or rules as to how to offer the best experience. The best way to learn and develop these is, of course, by observing how your visitors actually interact with your website and learn how customers use the website and what they actually need. So we have for you 4 insights, which I call very, very briefly with these titles. Tap everything, tap anywhere. I think that's clear. Back to the footer, about the importance of the footer in the mobile experience. Templates, colors, and changes, just a few guidelines in the area of templates. And to call or not to call, referring to the option to actually initiate a phone call while browsing. Moving to the first insight. So when we were comparing the interaction of users with the standard desktop websites to the interactions of users with mobile websites, we found something that we didn't expect. Users with a touch interface device expect everything on the page, and I literally mean everything, to be a link, to be tappable, to lead to additional information. Users will tap every image, every title, and even text paragraph, expecting them to lead to the next page and provide more information. Very quickly, and I'm not sure, I hope you can see this. This is the ClickTale homepage, and what you see on the left is the desktop version. The clicks are marked in very tiny blue and grayish dots. And on the right is the smartphone version. And again, the taps here are marked with the dots. The more dots-intensive areas get warmer colors, so you will see red and yellow, for example, at the top of the menu for the smartphone example. But I think that the difference is clear, and I hope you can see it through this interface. So what could be the reasons for this change in usage pattern? It's not quite clear. I think, first of all, tapping is obviously very easy. It could be that the fact is so easy to tap in a touch device that your fingers are already there holding the device and things just happen. And also it could be that while with a desktop experience, we have these best practices of displaying what is actually clickable, where the mouse cursor changes and indicates which image or element is actually clickable. That obviously doesn't exist in a touch interface. And so your visitors don't know what you expect them to tap or do not expect them to tap, and then you can literally see them tapping everywhere. Whatever the reason, it's important to understand that users expect everything to be tappable, so either you make it very clear what is and what isn't, or you prepare those layers of background and additional information so that you support their needs. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the footer. In standard web design, menus are located at the top of the page, and very little attention is given to the footer. In recent years, we've seen a trend where the footers have grown quite heavily, but I think the reason for that would be best described as designers deciding to use the footer space strategically, so to speak, for things we must include on the website, but we are absolutely not interested in. However, when we looked at the way users are interacting with the site using a touch device, we realized the footer regains its importance as a menu to navigate within your site. Top menus receive less attention, and the footer is suddenly a lot more useful. The reason for that seems to be the ease of scrolling. Since it is so easy to scroll, visitors using touch devices will scroll much further down the page than they would when browsing using a desktop computer. The famous fold issue, which I'm sure all of you are aware of, is much, much weaker in a mobile experience. The typical experience of a user searching for something would not be using the top menus through a mobile device, unless there's a very clear menu with 3 or 4 big buttons. The typical experience would be that the user would simply very quickly scroll down the page looking for the information they're looking for, and if it's not there, either they will abandon or they will be looking at the footer as their last resort. Using ClickTale with our scroll reach heat map, it's very easy to see those differences. If we look at our product tool page, which is a very long page, and as I mentioned, we offer the exact same page for the desktop and for the mobile traffic. So since we offer so many wonderful features, the page is very long, and it's made of paragraphs that there's a little thumbnail at the left and a text paragraph on the right. So when we ran a scroll reach heat map for the desktop version, you see that I would say something like maybe 30% of the page has those very warm colors, starting from red and going back to the yellows. But if you look at the smartphone experience, again, exactly the same page, you will see that the yellow, meaning that a majority of the visitors actually scroll down to the end of the page. And we all know that the smartphone experience will be much more difficult to actually see what's written on this page. But still, because the scrolling is so easy, we can see that it happens much, much more often, and people will go down to a very long page. So the bottom line here is that when designing for a mobile experience, you can be very comfortable with long pages. Scroll is easy, and mobile users are happy to scroll. You also need to pay attention to the footer as a real anchor of the page and a way to navigate through the site. You need to make sure it's clear and it includes links to the main content that you want to offer. Moving on to the third point, I call it templates, colors, and changes. This insight that I want to share with you is a phenomenon we first saw with one of our customers who took part in the beta program, and we've recently published a case study together. The company is called Link4. They are the leader of direct insurance market in Poland. They launched operations in 2003, and they are part of the RSA group, which is one of the world's leading insurance companies. I've recently just discovered that they are actually the insurers for the cows in Denmark. But back to our world and Link4's website. So in December of last year, Link4 launched a completely new website that is based in responsive design and aimed at catering for the rapidly growing mobile traffic. The usage statistics show that it's a 316% increase in the amount of mobile traffic to the site between March of last year and March of this year. As part of the ClickTale Touch Beta program, we worked together with Link4 to to gain some understanding about how the mobile users use the website. And the interesting thing we saw here is that on this page that you now see, essentially the left version is the home page, and the right version is you need to click to actually see the car insurance. And what we found is that when we saw session playback using ClickTale, we saw that users chose the option from the top menu. They wanted to go to the auto insurance. And once the page changed, they clicked that same option again. It was obvious that they didn't realize they were actually on that page already. This obviously causes frustration with the customer who was expecting something to happen, expecting the content they requested, and they don't feel like they found it. This was not a problem on the desktop version at all. So the reasons for that could be that when using a mobile device, customers, as we discussed, are not necessarily 100% focused on the screen, and they may have missed the actual graphic representation of the screen changing. Another option is that maybe in the small screen, some differences between templates are not as clear as on the big screen. And as we see in the examples here, the differences in the location of the photos and the buttons are quite subtle. So the bottom line here again is, when designing for mobile users, particularly for smartphone users, you want to make sure that different pages can easily be distinguished in order to make sure that the visitors have a better browsing experience. Finally, to my last bit of insight, which I think is the most interesting, I call it to call or not to call. And this is interesting because I think here is the first time that we found that the insight that you will gain from ClickTale actually goes against what is usually considered best practice in the industry when developing a mobile device. As you probably know, one of the most frequent pieces of advice given when you design for a smartphone is to use the unique abilities of the phone above and beyond any other computer. So for example, the fact that the phone has a GPS system and you can provide content that is relevant for a specific location. Another unique capability of the phone is obviously the fact that it can initiate voice calls. It's a classic scenario for a website that is displayed on a smartphone to offer support or services by initiating a call. What we found was that when we worked with our customers in two different scenarios, one where the call initiated was for sales and the other one was initiated for support, the customers didn't actually want to use that initiate call button. And we saw it in two ways. In one of the screens where it was clearly indicated that a call would be initiated with a big call us button, customers just avoided using that button. We saw them browsing around the button, but they wouldn't click on it or tap on it. They looked for other solutions. In that customer's case, they found the other solution in a contact us form through the footer. In another example, the call button didn't actually mention a call would be initiated. It just said contact us. And in that scenario, we could see customers tapping the button and then immediately going back to that same screen, which means once the phone actually initiated the call, they immediately stopped it and went back to the page looking for another solution. So the bottom line here is that initiating a call, although a very nice idea and could be helpful in some scenarios, is not always the action the customer is looking for. So we're reaching the end of my part, and I hope we managed to keep you interested and maybe even tell you a few things you didn't know before. To summarize the main points I discussed in the last half hour or so, I want to say in general we find that the touch experience is very different to the well-known desktop mouse keyboard experience. There are no established best practices for touch interface usability and design. Rules of thumb and general advice do not necessarily work. And obviously the best way to understand what your users need is to watch their behavior. More specifically, just to summarize the insights that we've seen here in the examples today, I'll go through them very, very briefly so that we have time for a few questions. Touch interface users expect everything to be tappable. Scrolling is much, much easier. The footer, as I said, regaining its importance. You have to think about the templates. And finally, initiating a call is not necessarily the right thing to do in every scenario. So I hope all of this makes sense. And I will now move you back to Anthony to start the Q&A section. Anthony, I hope you received some interesting questions for us.
We certainly did, Hadas. Thank you so much. And before we do move into that, we've got a few minutes left so we can get some questions in here. If you do have a question, go ahead and enter it into that chat area to the left of your screen. We're going to do our best to get to as many of these as we can with the time that does remain. So with that, first question here, Hadas, is someone's asking, if you are aware of a mobile strategy, a typical mobile strategy that is currently being adopted by leading retail companies.
So it's an interesting question. If I understand correctly, the question is there one leading strategy that the leaders are taking? And I think the answer is, well, at the moment there isn't one. We find from our customers, from our own surveys, that customers usually just at this stage try different things. So they would try a dedicated website, they would try a different app, they would try various different things, and we are still in very early days as far as mobile strategy. I've just yesterday saw this new research that said, I think something like only less than 30% of companies have an established mobile strategy that they've considered and thought through and are already applying, and most of them are still trying to figure out exactly what's the right fit for them. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Next question we have here is, what is your insight on having a dedicated mobile website versus a responsive design for an e-commerce website?
So from our experience, and we've seen both strategies being implemented, I would say there's no one right answer. I think e-commerce is a general term, and it really depends on what's the goal of your website and what you aim to achieve. So for example, I think if the goal is conversion, if you want to get people to actually buy things, then usually a responsive design will not give the best experience, because with responsive, the flexibility that you have for forms and checkout is a bit limited because of the way it's designed. And in that case, I will go for a completely tailored mobile experience. On the other hand, if the website is used as an addition to other shopping strategies, then that could work. If it's a catalog, if it's where people go to look at reviews, to read, to compare prices and so on, then we've seen responsive work for that very, very, very well. And in general, as I said, there's no one right solution, and we've seen things work in both ways.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Our next question, and I believe this is referring back to the video clip that we played earlier, where we're kind of showing the interface there. And the question is, does ClickTale record the entire session, or is it only pages that have the ClickTale pixels and/or script?
So our code has to be on the page for us to record it. If the page does not include the ClickTale code, then we can't record the interaction of the users on that page. So the answer is ClickTale will record the entire session as long as our pixel or our code is on every page of that session.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Looks like we've probably got time for one more quick question here. This one is, this person is asking if you could maybe talk a little bit about the advantages of ClickTale versus Google Analytics.
Okay, brilliant question. So as I mentioned at the beginning of my part, Google Analytics is what we would call traditional analytics. So the insights you would get from Google Analytics would usually describe how visitors use your website on a page level. So how many page views on each page, and you can segment that and look at how many visitors on each page and how they moved between pages. ClickTale is a layer above that. In fact, we have an integration with Google Analytics, and it works really well together, where you can find a segment that you're interested in Google Analytics. And if there's a behavior that you don't understand why people land on this page but always leave, they don't actually do what you expected them to do, you go and you run a heat map of ClickTale and you understand what is it exactly that they were looking at on the page. And it's a classic scenario where you have a button and you think it's very, very clear. All you need to do, dear user, is click the button. And you look at the recordings from ClickTale and you look at the heat map, and it turns out that either the button is too low and most of your visitors don't see it, or it's just not clear enough, or there's something else that attracts the users on this page and you didn't realize it. So ClickTale will give you that added value of understanding what's going on inside the page. It's completely an additional layer to what Google Analytics would give you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Hadas. Appreciate that. And unfortunately, that does take us to the end of our scheduled times. We'll go ahead and wrap things up here. So Julie and Hadas, both thank you so much for the information and the time that you shared today. We really appreciate all that you shared, and appreciate having you join us today. So we thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you for having me as well.
And just a reminder to everyone as we conclude our webcast here, we will be sending out a recording of the full webcast, so you will receive that shortly. So please look for that as an attendee. We'll get that over to you probably within the next 24 hours. We also encourage you to keep your conversation going on Twitter. We used the hashtag today was at ClickTale Mobile. So if you were not able to join us during the webcast, you can still go back and visit the comments that were made there, so please do so. So in closing, a big thank you to ClickTale, who was our sponsor, as well as to ReadyTalk, who provided the web platform that we used. If you'd like to learn more about ReadyTalk and their services, you can go to readytalk.com/AMA. Last but not least, a big thank you to you, the audience, for your time and attention, and we invite you to keep joining us for these weekly Thought Leader webcasts. That does end our presentation for today. Thanks so much for joining. Have a great rest of your day.